Testing, testing. Can you hear me now? Apparently so. Okay. Happy Memorial Day, everybody. Technical difficulties. Trying to use the new phone again. So apparently it's much easier to stream with the old phone, and since you guys don't seem to be able to pick up any obvious quality improvements with the new phone, even though the camera's far, far better, I'm just going to stick with this. Yeah, I gotta give me a minute. I'm thrown by that. Okay, anyway. It's Memorial Day. Not nearly as nice as yesterday. In fact, it rained a little bit, and it's kind of gloomy right now, but still warm. Highs in the mid-70s, I suppose. That's what they're saying. It's 65 right now, a little cloudy. Not bad, though. This one I've really been looking forward to, so we're going to take a little time with this one. We're complete through June 5th in the 1966 card and dice replay. We're going to take some time and go over the standings, and more importantly, get into the league leaders and some of the stats here today. Good weekend overall, slept a little rough. Set up the new printer last night. Step-by-step instructions. Just go to HP Smart and follow the directions. Yeah, right. I tell you what, I'm so frickin' tired of technology not working right. Just frustrates the shit out of me. Whew, okay. But hey, it's a beautiful day. We're alive. I've got some delicious Coastal Peaks coffee and a Coastal Peaks mug. I mean, come on. What more could you ask for? Oh, yeah, that's a damn fine cup of coffee. I ordered I've tried a lot of them. I ordered a bag of the Crockett coffee on recommendation from someone here. I think it was Frank. Anyway, that'll be arriving. I'd be surprised if anything beats this. There was a place called Rudolph's in San Luis Obispo, later changed their name to West End. I thought that was the best I ever had. They went out of business, and searching for a new place until I stumbled upon Coastal Peaks. I'd have to say now, when I go down there, it used to be the wineries I was most excited about. Okay, now I don't drink as much as I did. I'll have a glass of wine occasionally, but now it's the Coastal Peaks coffee. Usually the first thing I hit up when I get down there. Anyway, enough about me and coffee and technology. Let's go ahead and dig into the numbers. I'm probably going to have to top off my cup now. Oh yeah, let's take a look at the new pain in the ass printer. Yeah, there it is. So far, so good. And of course, Mookie's been into everything. And then my Outlook mail sets itself down instead of the top of the page. It sets itself to where the first email starts. So you have to scroll back up every time you want to reply or use any of the functions, do an attachment. It never did that before. I tell you what, guys, I'm about ready to declare war on technology. All right, I'm going to get a cup of coffee and we'll dive into it here. You know, it's a catch-22. I need the coffee to get me going. On the other hand, I don't think it does my anxiety disorder any favors. Keeps me nice and tightly wound at all times. Although, you know, at my age, I've slowed down a lot. Memorial Day, for me, looks like we're going to need the light, aren't we? Now I got to block out some of that outside light. I can see the reflection there. Anyway, Memorial Day. So why? Oh, that's a reflection. Okay, let's try it without that. Sorry, trying to get set up here. Apparently it's gonna... What if I turn the overhead light on? It doesn't seem to matter much. We're going to start with the National League. Let's see how that comes through. I want to see how this comes up on the screen, on the monitor. Yeah, it's pretty good, I guess. I don't know why it doesn't seem as straight to me as it should be. Bear with me while I dink around. What if we tilted that a little bit? Oh yeah, that makes a difference. And I could zoom in even a little bit more. Maybe not. Is anyone here, by the way? Looks like 5 watching. Let me know if you can see that all right. I'm going to slide that over just a tad. You know what I'm missing? My reading glasses. Okay, we're off to kind of a rough start here today, but that's okay. You can always fast forward this first part, I guess. Here we are, 1966 National League. A tight three-team race so far in the NL. The Dodgers in first place, 2 games ahead of the Pirates, 3.5 ahead of the Phillies. The Reds on a torrid streak, having won 3 straight, 9 of their last 10, 11 of their last 12, sitting at 500 now. The Astros, who got off to a hot start, are now slightly underachieving. And I say underachieving, of course, in contrast to their actual to-date 1 loss. They're 2 games behind the pace. Tied with the Cardinals, 8 back. The Braves, a disappointment so far, 10 games back. The biggest disappointment, of course, the Giants. Once again, we see them. They're 11 games off of their real-life pace. They did win their last game. And they'll play again tomorrow, by the way. Yeah, today it's White Sox and Angels. Tomorrow we finish up that 4-game set, Giants at Phillies. Cubs, 21-28. And the Mets in the cellar, 15-28. Not that far off of their real-life pace. They're 2 games off. Cubs have actually overachieved. Let's take a look at the American League standings. Orioles with the best record in baseball, 34-14, 3 games ahead of the Twins. The Twins have overachieved by 9 games so far, making it a race. Kind of a 2-team race. Cleveland keeps trying to creep in there. They go up and down, but they're 27-20 now, just 6.5 back. And yet they're 3 games off their real-life pace. They were 30-17 at this point in real life, on their way to a 500 season. Interesting. Kansas City still hanging in there at 24-22, 9 back. The Tigers, who got off to a hot start, have slumped badly of late. They're 22-25 now. The Senators 23-27. Angels, who play today, they play the White Sox. Angels are 22-27. They're 2 games off their real life pace. White Sox 21-26. They're 4 games off of their real life pace. Red Sox 21-28, and the Yankees in last at 14-33. And as bad as they were, they finished last that year at 70-89. They're 8 games off of that pace. Been an absolute disaster for the Yankees. Let's go to the newspaper style recap. One of my favorites now. I think it was Bob Cole who reminded me of this. I knew about it, but I wasn't using it. And of course, the newspaper style recap, you've got a condensed version of the standings, and then we have the top 5 in the batting race. We find Jose Tartabull, who hasn't even been in the lineup for a while, yet still maintains enough plate appearances to lead the league in hitting at 391. Boog Powell is second at 344. Leon Wagner of the Indians at 333. Al Kaline at 326. And Frank Robinson at 324. So you can see Frank Robinson. This is fun too. Robinson, who won the Triple Crown in real life, 5th in batting, tied for the league lead in home runs, 2nd in runs batted in. I mean, he's in position. Frank and Rick Reichart tied for the home run lead with 15. Willie Horton, 14. Boog Powell, 13. And Jackie Warner of the Angels, 13. A surprise entrant into the top 5. In runs batted in, it's Harmon Killebrew leading the way with 46. Frank Robinson, of course, 41. His teammate Brooks Robinson, 38. His teammate Kurt Bluffery, 36. Not hard to see why the Orioles have the record they have, is it? Fred Whitfield of the Indians tied for 4th with 36 as well. In wins, we have 3 pitchers with 7. Jim Palmer, Dean Chance, and Sam McDowell, who hasn't started in a while, but he's coming back to the rotation on his next turn. Jack Aker of Kansas City leads in saves with 12. Larry Sherry 11. Stu Miller 10. Bob Lee of the Angels 8. Also Ron Klein of Washington with 8. ERA, it's El Tiante at 1.76. Yeah, he's taking the lead over McDowell. It's close. McDowell 1.79. Dave Boswell of the Twins 2.03. Steve Barber of the Orioles 2.14. And Fred Talbot still holding it together with smoke and mirrors at 2.56. Tommy Agee has a 17-game hitting streak currently. You can see the others there. Don Buford leads the league in steals with 18. Campy Campanera 16. Tommy Agee 14. Tartable and Fred Valentine with 11. In strikeouts, McDowell way ahead with 94. Pete Rickard 78. Jim Cott 68. Earl Wilson 66. And Louis Tiant with 64. Another thing interesting on this is the who's hot, who's not. I'll let you glance at that for a moment. And you can always pause these and come back to it. We'll do the same thing for the National League. Newspaper style. There's the standings. Gene Alley lost a couple points. He's still leading the league at 378. Right on his tail is Ron Santo at 367. Felipe Alou, 343. Tim McCarver at 322. And Joe Torre at 321. In home runs, Hank Aaron ahead of everybody, 21. Although he hasn't hit one in a while. You guys know that. Jimmy Wynn and Willie Mays tied for second with 13 apiece. Others with 12. We'll look into the others a little bit later. In RBIs, it's Aaron and Wynn tied with 51. Bill White of the Phillies, 44. Joe Torre, 42. Others tied with 40. In wins, Sandy Koufax leading the way with 11. Bob Veal, Bob Gibson, and Juan Marichal all with 8. And someone put a comment on the game, the Pittsburgh game the other day, that Veal was one of the unsung aces of the 60s, and I'd have to agree with that. Certainly a stellar performance yesterday. Billy McCool pacing the majors in saves with 14. The Vulture Phil Regan with 10. Claude Raymond and Roy Face with 9. And ERA, it's Koufax 1.41 now after his recent shutout. Larry Jaster of St. Louis 1.61. Marichal 1.95. Veal 2.31, so his shutout vaulted him into the 4 position. Don Sutton in 5th with a 2.48. Maury Wills has an 18-game hitting streak. I did not know that. I used to look those things up before. It's a reminder to me to look up those things before the game. I've been slacking on some of my prep. Actually, I've been in disarray since I went on that vacation, to be honest. Trying to get back into a comfortable routine. In stolen bases, Lou Brock with 20. Maury Wills right behind him with 19. We have Willie Davis, his teammate, with 13. Adolfo Phillips with 11, and Sonny Jackson with 10. In strikeouts, Koufax way ahead of everybody, 115 strikeouts. Bob Gibson in second with 88. Jim Maloney has 86. Jim Bunning 81, and Bob Veal with 77. Man, we're going to hold it screen for a moment on the who's hot, who's not. Then I'm going to go to the first grand totals. The team stats, in other words. You know, Ben brought up an interesting point about WHIP. yesterday. I couldn't find it. You can find it. You've got to go into the individual teams to see it. Okay, let's go to first grand totals. This tells us a lot about how each team is performing as a team. Pirates, this should come as no surprise to anyone. We've been talking about this all season long. A .292 team in batting average. Do they lead in runs scored? No, they do not. They are third. The Astros lead with the Braves in second. So I guess further proof that a high team batting average doesn't guarantee you scoring runs. But I mean, they're not doing badly at all. 256 is nothing to apologize for, that's for sure. Astros second in batting, but they lead in runs. It doesn't show walks here, but with that close, they're that close in average. Well, they're not that close in average. I take that back. They're close in home runs. Pittsburgh with a much better average. Pittsburgh with a lot more doubles than Houston. There's another page we can look at that, actually. In fact, let's do that, and we'll come back to this one. The second grand totals. Okay, not much there for pitchers, but for the teams, you've got the on-base and the slugging. So let's look at Houston and Pittsburgh. Still very close. Pittsburgh at 334 on base. Houston a little better at 336, but Pittsburgh with a much higher slugging. Who leads in slugging? Well, it's Pittsburgh. 448. Houston leading in on base barely over Pittsburgh. Well, that's interesting. And yet the Astros have scored quite a few more runs. Doesn't make any sense to me. I'm trying to make sense of it. I'm not finding it. Not hard to see why the Giants are struggling. Last in the league in batting. 8th out of 10 in runs scored. The Mets absolutely pathetic with 137 runs scored. Second to the last in pitching as well. The Cubs score, but they can't pitch. Dodgers, not surprisingly, with leading the league in team ERA, pretty much carried by Koufax, right? 2.87 as a team. The Giants in second. So the Giants are pitching, they're just not hitting. And you'd think, oh my goodness, the lineup with the middle of the order of Mays, McCovey, and Hart, how is this team not scoring more? Pirates third in pitching, Phillies fourth. They're the only four teams under 4 in ERA. Cincinnati at 4 even. I kind of expected the Cardinals to pitch a little bit better than that too. Okay, a 3.92 team league ERA rather for the NL. American League slightly lower at 3.82. Baltimore way ahead of everybody in runs scored, and they lead the league in batting. Third in home runs. Detroit leads in home runs, 65. Cleveland 62. The Orioles 61. Runs scored. Minnesota is second, 243. Then you have Detroit and Cleveland tied at 219. The Angels at 216. So scoring has not been the Angels' problem. They haven't pitched particularly well, just slightly below the league average, however. The Senators and the Twins lead in pitching. The White Sox, who probably should be leading in pitching, but remember the White Sox, especially early in the season, their pitching staff was largely sabotaged by their fielding. The Indians and the Athletics also remaining above league average or below, however you want to frame it, in pitching. Let's check the second grand totals here. Baltimore way ahead of everybody in on base. No, not way ahead. Minnesota's right behind them. They lead in slugging. Detroit is second. The Twins in third in team slugging. Let's go to the record book before we get into the individual numbers. This is for the American League once again. You can look at some of these things. I'm going to see the ones that interest me the most. You see 4 players have a 5-hit game. Foy, Powell, Valentine, and Rich Rollins. Many players have a 2-home run game. Excuse me, nobody has a 3 in the American League. RBIs, 3 players have had 6 RBI games. Demeter, King, and how about that? Little Eddie Brinkman. Stolen base games, it's all White Sox. Hell, I remember that game. Battered game score. Demeter on April 19th. That was pretty much Demeter's whole season, wasn't it? He hasn't done much since then. I remember that game too. Willie Horton, Bob Savarin also with 84 and 80 respectively. Least hits allowed. 4 one-hitters. Dave Boswell, Louis Tiant, Sam McDowell, and Minnie Rojas. Strikeouts, McDowell had a 14 strikeout game. That's the high. Rickard a 12. The Jim Duckworth game, 11 and 8 2/3 innings, and a lot of, McDowell with a pair of 11. So McDowell appears high on the list 3 times, and we have a lot of 10s. Home runs allowed, that's a dubious honor. 3 pitchers have given up 4 long balls in a game. You can see them right there. Pitcher game score, that's one I do like. McDowell's game on May the 21st, a 97 game score. McNally caught Boswell and 2 by Tiant to round out the top 5. Jumping over to the National League. Three players with 5 hit games, Mazeroski, Staub, and Aaron. Aaron, of course, with that 4 home run game. Pretty much it is the highlight of the season so far, wouldn't you say? What do you think it was? Post it in the comments. Aaron scored 5 runs in a game. That was the same game, May the 22nd. In the very same game, Aaron had 7 RBIs. That's the high. He had a 6 RBI game as well on May the 17th. A lot of National League players had 5 RBI games. Sano had a couple. Actually, he had 3. Yeah, May 8th, May 10th. No, that's Staub, 5-8 for Sano and 5-18 for Sano. Lou Brock, Sonny Jackson had 3 stolen base games. Batter game score, well, duh. I mean, seriously. That's what a 4-homer game will get you. 5 runs, 7 RBIs, a game score of 126. Nobody's going to touch that. Come on. How about strikeouts? Koufax, 14, 13. Gaylord Perry, Jim Maloney twice, and Koufax again with 12. Koufax appears on the list 4 times. He had an 11K game on May 14th. John Boozer, the only pitcher to throw up 4 long balls in a game, and the pitcher game score way back on April 13th. Sandy Koufax with a 94, Maloney a 93, Marichal had a 91 and a 90, and one of those was a complete game 1-hitter in which he faced the minimum, which I still say should be the highest game score. So he didn't have enough strikeouts, I guess. Okay. Let's go to the league leaders. If anybody's in the chat, say hi. Oh, there we go. Rick's here. And Jim's here. Happy Memorial Day, guys. All right, we saw the top 5 in batting. Joe Torre in 5th. Glenn Beckert and Charlie Smith tied for 6th at 320. Jimmy Wynn 318. Mazeroski 312. Clemente and Alou 308. Teammates. Rusty Staub at 307. Joe Morgan, not surprisingly, leading in runs scored. We haven't got to walks yet, but look at that. 49 walks. Sano is second with 37. So back to runs scored. Alou and Wynn 43, Parker 40, Wills 39, Clemente, Aaron, Santo, and Callison round out the leaders. In doubles, Lou Johnson and Roberto Clemente with 16, Felipe Alou with 15, Johnny Callison 14, Adolfo Phillips rounds out the top 5 with 13, and then we have several players with 12 and 11, including everybody's favorite, Woody Woodward. Look at that, would you? Look at that, Michael. Woody Woodward is among the league leader in the league leaders in doubles. Felipe Alou with 8 triples leads the way. Tim McCarver has 7. Joe Morgan 5, and a handful with 4. Home runs. Okay, we saw the top 3 with others tied with 12. Who are the others? Well, it's Ron Santo, his teammate Billy Williams, Willie Stargell, who just hit his 12th yesterday, and Jim Ray Hart. Then we have Dick Allen and Don Clendenin with 11. Bill White and Willie McCovey with 10. Others tied with 9. So 10 will get you in. We've seen the top 4 in RBIs. The 5th place tie was Santo and Staub with 40. Then you have Stargell, Billy Williams, Don Clendenin, Johnny Callison, and then Roberto Clemente and Willie Mays. Walks, well, again, Morgan, come on. It's no wonder he leads the league in runs scored, is it? Intentional walks, which I don't issue a lot of, but you can see Jimmy Wynn has 5. Aaron and Julian Javier. Javier bats 8th most of the time, so I would say his was a case of the pitcher coming up next. Wynn and Aaron were just purely out of respect. Byron Brown striking out a ton. Sweet Lou Johnson has been plunked 8 times. Felipe Alou in second with 6. Several players have been hit 4 times. Sacrifice hits. We saw the stolen base leaders. Gene Alley has the longest hitting streak of the season, 19. Wills, with a current 18-game streak, will try to tie that in his next game. Pinch hitting average, which is kind of fluky in Strat-O-Matic. I should point that out. You have to have a certain amount of at-bats to qualify for that. But there could be players missing. Slugging and on base. Look at Ron Santo. He leads in both categories. Holy cow. 638 slugging, 479 on base. And of course, add those up, and naturally he leads in OPS as well. Second in OPS is Wynn, Felipe Alou, Gene Alley, and his teammate Don Clendenin. In slugging, Clendenin's in second. Did you know that? I didn't know that. That's what's fun about this. Don Clendenin is second in the National League in slugging. Jimmy Wynn in third, Felipe Alou, and then Willie Stargell round out the top five. Mays just misses. Aaron just misses. Wow, with 21 homers. How in the hell is he seventh in slugging? Well, you know what? We're going to take a look at that. I'm going to highlight the Braves here in a moment. If I forget, give me a gentle nudge. I'll give you a swift kick in the ass. That's from a movie or a show. I think it's from Patton, actually. Total bases, Felipe Alou. Second, his teammate Henry Aaron. Jimmy Wynn, Ron Santo, and his teammate Billy Williams round out the top five. Clemente just missing. And there's some lefty-righty things which don't interest me as much. I guess I could hold it on there for a while. Give you the opportunity to pause it and look at that if you like. X percentage, of course, when you enter the game manually, you don't get that. Jerry Buchek still leading the league in errors. Pitchers. Koufax, of course, 11 wins. We covered that. 8-8-8. Blasingame and Bunning, 7. Sutton, 6. Lemaitre, Ellsworth, and Blass with 5. In losses, Cloninger and Race Decky have 7 losses. We saw the top 5 in ERA. Gaylord Perry is in 6th at 2.59. Dirker, Dennis Rybant, Jim Bunning, Wade Blasingame, Bobby Bolin, and Bob Gibson round out the leaders. Complete games, Koufax with 9, Jim Bunning 7, Gibson and Marichal 6 apiece, Short and Veal with 5. We saw the saves leaders. Didn't show Abernathy or Lindsay. I think that showed the top 4 and then several tied with 8. Marichal has 3 shutouts. Koufax, Bunning, Short, and Veal with 2 apiece. Strikeouts, we saw the top 5. Sutton just outside at 75. Marichal 74. Short 71. Who's easiest to run on? It would appear to be Bobby Bolin and Joey J. Pitchers batting. Look at that Holtzman. Man, we've had some pitchers batting. Hits per 9, you might think it would be Koufax, but it's Larry Jaster. Then you've got walks per 9, Ks per 9, homers per 9. Look at Maloney's Ks per 9. Pappas, the master of not walking anyone, leads in that category. That's walks per 9. Stingy, 1.06. Righty, lefty. Strikeout to walk, although Pappas has now dropped to 4th in strikeout to walk. Gaylord Perry in the lead. Let's go over back to the American League here. I'm going to refill my coffee. Drinking a lot of coffee on this one. Hell, at the rate I'm going, I have to make more coffee before the 1:30 game. All right, American League leaders. We saw the top 5 in hitting. Killebrew in 6th at 319, Colavito 316, Fregosi 315, Reichard, his teammate, 310, Fred Valentine 308, Floyd Robinson 305, and Kurt Blefary 301. In runs scored, Frank Robinson strikes again, leads the league in runs scored. His teammate in 2nd, Boog Powell with 39, Rick Reichard, Kurt Blefary, and Harmon Killebrew round out the top 5. There's your hits leaders. Bernie Allen of the Twins leads the league in doubles, 15. Frank Robinson, Joe Foy, Dick Green, 14. Bobby Cannot pacing the majors with 9 triples. Jim Northrup, 7. Fregosi and Tartable, 6. Blair and Pepitone have 5. We saw the home run leaders. We saw the top 5 anyway. 6th is Blefary, Whitfield, and Colavito with 12. George Scott, 11. Killebrew, 11. And Norm Cash with 10. Others tied with 9. It's the same as the National League. 10 will get you in. We saw the top 5 in RBIs. 6th is Killebrew at 35. Willie Horton, Rick Reichard, Dick Green, George Scott, and Jim Fregosi. Killebrew pacing the way in walks. Shaw, McAuliffe, Foy, and a tie between Frank Robinson and Wirt round out the top 5. Powell and Frank Robinson with 4 intentional walks. Not surprising. What is kind of surprising is their teammate Andy Etchebarren is next with 3. Killebrew also with 3. Tony Oliva's been plunked 9 times, ejected once. Remember? I remember it because he was the first ejection of the season. I don't remember if the pitcher got tossed too. Sacrifice hits, mostly pitchers, of course. Stolen bases, we saw the top 5. Reichard and Roy White with 10 just outside it. AG with the longest hitting streak of the season, and it's still active. Floyd Robinson has an 11-game streak going. Current streaks, of course, designated by the asterisk. Slugging and on base. Boog Powell pacing the league with a 701 slugging. In fact, the top 3 spots occupied by Baltimore Orioles, Frank Robinson and Kurt Blefary. Rick Reichard, 4th at 598, Colavito 594, Killebrew, Whitfield, Foy, Wagner, Kaline, Valentine, and Tartable. In on base, Kaline barely ahead of Killebrew. Powell in 3rd at 429, Tartable 420, Frank Robinson 416, Foy and Bluffery over 400. So Powell leads in OPS, Frank Robinson second, Killebrew third, K-Line 4, and Bluffery 5. There's your total bases. Again, 2 birds atop, Frank Robinson, Boog Powell. Lefty, righty. Wow, 10. Horton 10, where's the home runs? Hang on a second. Of Horton's 14 homers, 10 have come against left-handed pitching. That's kind of interesting. Whereas the 3 Orioles have done most of their damage against right-handers. Jim Fregosi now leads the majors in errors with 13. Steady Eddie, or maybe not so steady Eddie Brinkman with 12. We saw the wins leaders, and you can see why it only listed 3. We've got a handful tied with 6 wins. Mel Stottlemyre, the lone 8-game loser. Tommy John has lost 7. McDowell and Lindblad yet to lose a game. We saw the top 5 in ERA. Marcelino Lopez is 6th at 2.61. Denny McClain 2.67. John Buzzhart, Camilo Pascual, Mike McCormick, Dick Stigman, and Fritz Peterson round out the leaders. Tiant leads with 6 complete games, Cott with 5, a handful with 4. We saw the top 5 in saves. Just outside is Don McMahon with 7. Al Worthington with 6. Wilhelm and Sherry with a 1,000 save percentage. Camilo Pascual with 3 shutouts. Him and Marichal are the only ones to do it so far. Handful with 2. Most long balls award goes to Earl Wilson. Strikeouts, we saw the top 5. Just outside is Boswell, McClain, Lolich with 59, Barber, Palmer, Hunter, and McNally. Hits, look at pitcher's batting average. Oh my goodness. Fred Newman, 444. Gary Peters, 400. Three pitchers have homered. I didn't check that in the National League. We'll go back to that in a minute. Hits per 9. Boswell ahead of Tiant. McDowell, who was leading, in 3rd now. McDowell and K's per 9 leads. Stingiest, Fritz Peterson. What was I going to look at? Pitchers homers. Let's go back to the National League for a minute. They also have 3 pitchers with a homer. Okay. What was I going to do? I'm going to highlight a team here. Let's take a look at the Braves, who are underachieving. I could have picked the Giants, I guess. Braves winning on the road, can't win at home. And there, of course, you can see this is what I look at every game. I'll have this page up for both teams. That's where I get my numbers from. I want to look at WHIP too, which is on another page. First, I'm going to take a short break and use the restroom. Alrighty, I've given you a good chance to look at the Braves hitters. Offense, certainly not their problem. Here's the problem for this team. Pitching. Chichi Olivo has been fantastic. So has Jarvis. Dick Kelly. So the bullpen, which I've maligned, remember they just recently acquired Abernathy. You know, actually, they have a very effective pen. It's mostly Cloninger and Johnson who've been and Fisher, of course. Fisher's 7 starts. He's just been creamed. But still, I mean, that's 30 starts out of 53 games where their starter really isn't giving them a chance. Here's the other thing you can go to, secondary, and this is the only place. No, it's not secondary, it's this, miscellaneous sabermetric. This is the only place you can find whip on each team's page. Listed under secondary, you've got opponent's average, hits per 9, walks per 9, Ks per 9, homers per 9, run support. You can see one reason Blasingame had such a good season. Not only has he pitched well, they score for him. Inherited runners, inherited in scoring position, inherited runners scored, inherited runners scoring percentage, strikeout to walk, whip, and WAR. How about that? Let's see what they have for the hitters. On base and slugging, stolen base percentage, runs created per 27 outs, total average, OPS, isolated power, total bases, at bats per homer, and WAR. This is why WAR is only really good in a large grouping of numbers, like to analyze a Hall of Fame career or not, for example. In a single season, I find it hard to believe that Felipe Alou has contributed more than Henry Aaron. Of course, he has a higher on base and a higher slugging. Well, I may have underestimated Felipe Alou a little bit there, huh? I want to do a breakdown of Koufax here. 178 average, 5.8 hits per 9, 1.9 walks, 9 Ks, 0.5 homers. Among the best run support on the team, really the best run support on the team. You almost can't count Moeller. He only had 1 start. And a WAR of 5, which frankly, that seems low. Heck, he has 11 of their 33 wins. He has a third of their wins. That's about all I've got, unless anybody wants to see anything else. Kind of a long one today, but I've been anxious to really dive into the 66 season numbers here. It's been a while. 82 comes up far more often, as those games play much faster, obviously, on the Windows game. Anyway, it's almost lunchtime here, so I'm going to get out of here, and I'll be back in about an hour and a half with the White Sox and the Angels, so please join me for that. Please like and subscribe. Thank you, one and all, for all of your support. And that's all I've got. I'm out of here. Join me for the game later. Take care, everybody. Happy Memorial Day.